November 22nd, 1987. Chicago, Illinois. It was a Sunday night. Families were sitting in their living rooms, watching television after dinner. Thanksgiving was just 2 days away. The city was cold. The wind was blowing off Lake Michigan. People were inside, cozy, distracted. On WGN-TV, the local news was airing a sports segment. The sportscaster, Dan Roan, was talking about the upcoming football game. The Chicago Bears were playing. Nothing unusual. Just another Sunday night broadcast. Just another sports update. Then something impossible happened. The screen flashed white. The image flickered and distorted. And suddenly, Dan Roan was gone. In his place was a figure wearing a rubber mask. The mask looked like Max Headroom, the famous computer-generated TV character from the 1980s. The face was familiar. The smile was creepy. But this was not Max Headroom. This was someone else. Someone wearing a cheap costume. Someone who had hijacked the television signal from somewhere outside the station. For 20 seconds the figure stood there in silence. No audio. Just the buzz of interference. He moved slightly. He seemed to be waiting. The camera wobbled. The background was a spinning corrugated metal wall. The whole setup looked amateurish, but effective. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, the signal returned to normal. Dan Roan was back on screen, looking confused and uncomfortable. He made a joke about it. The news anchor laughed it off. Everyone watching assumed it was a technical glitch. A malfunction. Nothing more. But that was just the beginning. 90 minutes later, it happened again. This time, the hijacker targeted WETW, the local PBS station. They were broadcasting an episode of Doctor Who. The episode was called The Horror of Fong Rock. It was a dark, atmospheric story. Perfect viewing for a cold November night. The screen flickered. The hijacker appeared. And this time, he had a lot to say. He complained about sportscasters. He held up a can of Pepsi. He made strange sounds. He talked about the NAACP and Canada. He said, "Bend over, bitch." An off-camera accomplice spanked him with a flyswatter. He groaned. He laughed. He wiggled his shoulders. Then, after 90 seconds of pure chaos, he disappeared. The Doctor Who episode returned. Viewers had missed about a minute and a half of the show. The hijacker was never caught. The FCC investigated. Engineers studied the footage. Conspiracy theories swirled on early internet forums. But to this day, no one knows who was behind that rubber mask. No one knows how they did it. And no one knows why. Welcome to Reddit Tea. I'm your host, and every week, we brew a fresh cup of Reddit's darkest, strangest, and most unforgettable stories. Today, we are diving into one of the most bizarre unsolved mysteries of the television age. The Max Headroom broadcast intrusion. A prank, a hack, or something stranger? Let's find out. To understand this mystery, you first need to understand who Max Headroom was. Because without that context, the hijacking makes no sense at all. Max Headroom was a fictional character created in 1985 by a British television producer named Rocky Morton. The character was originally designed as a video jockey for a music video show. But Max Headroom quickly became much bigger than that. Max Headroom was a computer-generated talk show host with a distinctive stuttering voice, a sarcastic sense of humor, and a face made of digital polygons. His head was shiny. His smile was wide. His eyes were unnerving. He was famous for saying things like, "CCC catch the wave," and "Blipverts." He appeared in music videos for artists like Sting and George Clinton. He appeared in Coca-Cola commercials, wearing a leather jacket and sunglasses, promoting New Coke. He even had his own television show called The Max Headroom Show, which aired on Channel 4 in the UK and later on ABC in the United States. For a few years in the late 1980s, Max Headroom was everywhere. He was a pop culture icon. People recognized that face immediately. Kids had Max Headroom action figures. Adults quoted his catchphrases. He was strange, futuristic, and memorable. So when a rubber mask of Max Headroom appeared on hijacked television signals, viewers knew exactly who they were looking at. But why Max Headroom? That is one of the many questions that has never been answered. Was the hijacker a fan of the character? Was he trying to make a statement about technology and media? Or was the mask simply the only one he could find at a costume shop? We may never know. Let me lay out the timeline of events exactly as they happened, minute by minute. Sunday, November 22, 1987. This was 2 days before Thanksgiving. The weather in Chicago was cold, with temperatures hovering around freezing. People were staying indoors. The city was quiet. The first intrusion occurred at approximately 9:14 p.m. Central Time. WGN-TV was broadcasting the sports segment of their nightly news. The station was based at 2501 West Bradley Place in Chicago. The signal reached millions of homes across the Midwest. The sportscaster, Dan Roan, was a well-known figure in Chicago sports journalism. He had been with WGN for several years. He was professional, calm, and experienced. Suddenly, the screen went black. Then a test pattern appeared. Then the Max Headroom figure appeared. He was wearing a Max Headroom rubber mask. The mask was not a high-quality replica. It was a cheap novelty mask, probably purchased from a costume shop. You could see the edges around his neck. You could see his real eyes through the eye holes of the mask. He was also wearing sunglasses, even though the mask already had painted-on glasses. This made him look even stranger. He wore a dark suit jacket over what appeared to be a white shirt or t-shirt. Behind him was a spinning corrugated metal wall. The wall seemed to be rotating slowly, like a piece of industrial equipment. It looked like a homemade backdrop. Maybe it was a garage door. Maybe it was a ventilation duct. No one knows for sure. The figure did not speak. There was no audio at all, just a loud buzzing noise. For 20 seconds he simply stood there. He moved slightly. He adjusted his position. He seemed to be waiting for something. Maybe he was waiting for the audio to work. Maybe he was nervous. Maybe this was just a test run. Then, the signal returned to normal. Dan Roan, the sportscaster, looked genuinely surprised. He looked off camera, as if asking his producers what had just happened. Then he turned back to the camera and said, "Well, if you're wondering what happened, so am I." The news anchor, whose name was Jim Beamman, laughed and said, "I don't know what that was, folks. We'll try to continue." The station engineers were baffled. They checked their equipment. Everything seemed fine. They assumed it was a one-time glitch. A prank, maybe. Nothing to worry about. They did not call the police. They did not alert the FCC. They moved on with the broadcast. But 90 minutes later, the hijacker returned. And this time, he was ready. At approximately 10:45 p.m., WDTW, the local PBS station, was broadcasting an episode of Doctor Who. The station was based at 5400 North St. Louis Avenue in Chicago. WDTW was a public television station, known for educational programming, British imports, and fundraising drives. The episode of Doctor Who that night was called The Horror of Fong Rock. It was a 4-part serial from 1977, starring Tom Baker as the Fourth Doctor. The episode was atmospheric and spooky, perfect for late-night viewing. Then the screen flickered. The Doctor Who broadcast was replaced by the same Max Headroom figure. But this time, there was audio. And the hijacker had a lot to say. The broadcast lasted about 90 seconds. It was chaotic, bizarre, and deeply strange. Let me describe what happened, second by second. The hijacker appeared, wearing the same cheap rubber mask and sunglasses. His lips were not moving because the mask was solid rubber. But someone off camera was providing audio. The voice was distorted. It sounded like someone talking through a voice changer, or speaking very close to a cheap microphone. It was high-pitched and strange, almost cartoonish. Here is a transcript of what the hijacker said, as best as anyone has been able to understand. Some parts are unclear because the audio quality is poor. But the main phrases have been confirmed by multiple listeners. He started by saying, "Yeah, that does it. That's it. That's the most, Then he said something that sounded like, "Your love is fading. I still see your face." Then he started complaining about sportscasters. "Let that be something, they're coming to get me." Then he said, "I have a friend in Canada. He's from the NAACP." Then he said clearly and distinctly, "Bend over, bitch." A person off camera, presumably the hijacker's accomplice, then spanked him with a flyswatter. You could hear the swat. You could see the hijacker react. The hijacker groaned and said, "Ah, you're so good at that." Then he held up a can of Pepsi. He shook it. He opened it. You could hear the can fizzing. He tilted his head back as if drinking from it, though the mask made it impossible to actually drink. Then he turned into the camera and said, "Whoa, man, that's great." Then he started making strange sounds. He wiggled his shoulders. He said something about "freakin' liberal" and "the greatest American hero," which was a popular TV show from the 1980s about a teacher who gets superpowers from an alien suit. Then he said, "Catch the wave." Finally, after 90 seconds, the signal returned to Doctor Who. The Doctor Who episode had continued playing during the hijacking. Viewers had missed about a minute and a half of the show. The station did not apologize or explain. They simply continued broadcasting as if nothing had happened. Now, let me talk about the technology behind this. Because what the hijacker did was not easy. It was not something an average person could do with off-the-shelf equipment from Radio Shack. Television signal hijacking is known as broadcast signal intrusion. It involves overriding a legitimate broadcast with an unauthorized signal. It is highly illegal, a federal crime punishable by up to 10 years in prison and fines of over $100,000. And in the 1980s, it was much harder than it sounds. To hijack a television signal, you need to transmit on the same frequency as the broadcast station. You need enough power to overpower the station's own signal. You need to be close enough to the station's transmitter, or you need to access the station's equipment directly, either physically or through a microwave relay. Most television stations in the 1980s used microwave relays to transmit signals from the studio to the main transmitter tower. These microwave signals were point-to-point, meaning they traveled in a straight line from one dish to another. If you could position yourself between the two dishes and broadcast on the same frequency, you could insert your own signal into the broadcast. That is likely what the Max Headroom hijacker did. He used a microwave transmitter to override the signal between the studio and the transmitter tower. The FCC investigated both intrusions thoroughly. Their report, which was eventually released through Freedom of Information requests, concluded that the WGN intrusion likely came from a small transmitter located somewhere near the John Hancock Center, a famous skyscraper in Chicago that stands at 875 North Michigan Avenue. The signal appeared to have been transmitted from a location within a few miles of the station. The WTW intrusion appeared to come from a different location, possibly from a microwave relay tower between the station and its main transmitter on the Sears Tower. The Sears Tower, now known as the Willis Tower, is the tallest building in Chicago. Its antennas broadcast signals across the entire city. So the hijacker either had accomplices at two different locations, or they moved their equipment between the two intrusions 90 minutes apart. That is a small window of time. Moving a microwave transmitter, a generator, a camera, a backdrop, and a person in a mask, all that equipment, across the city in 90 minutes would be challenging. It suggests that the hijacker had help. Within hours of the second intrusion, the FBI and the FCC were investigating. They interviewed station engineers. They analyzed the footage. They tried to trace the source of the intrusion using direction-finding equipment. They looked for suspects with the technical knowledge to pull off such a stunt. But the hijacker had covered their tracks well. The equipment was removed from the transmission site before investigators could triangulate its exact location. The hijacker left no fingerprints, no DNA, no physical evidence. The FCC investigation continued for months. They had suspects. They had theories. They interviewed dozens of people. But they never found enough evidence to charge anyone. By 1992, the statute of limitations had expired. The hijacker could no longer be prosecuted even if they were caught. The case was closed. The investigation was abandoned. So who was behind the Max Headroom intrusion? That is the question that has fascinated internet detectives for decades. Let me walk you through the most popular theories. Theory 1. It was an inside job. Some believe that the hijacker was a current or former employee of one of the Chicago television stations. This person would have had knowledge of the broadcast equipment, the frequencies, and the vulnerabilities. They might have had access to the station building. They might have known how to overcome the station's security. Proponents of this theory point to the fact that the hijacker seemed comfortable with the technology. They knew how to override the signal. They knew how to avoid detection. That suggests technical expertise that an average person would not have. But if it was an inside job, why would someone risk their career for a 90-second prank? It does not add up. Station employees undergo background checks. They are trained to report suspicious activity. The risk of getting caught would be extremely high. Theory 2. It was a hacker group. In the late 1980s, a subculture of phone freaks and computer hackers was emerging. These were technically savvy individuals who enjoyed breaking into systems for the challenge. Some of them turned their attention to television signals. They called themselves freaks, and hackers, and pirates. There was a known hacker group in Chicago at the time. They called themselves the Chicago Area Computer Hobbyist Exchange, or CASH for short. Some members of CASH were known to have experimented with broadcast equipment. They had built their own low-power television transmitters. They had pirated cable signals. They had the technical skills. Could one of them have been behind the Max Headroom intrusion? Possibly. But there is no direct evidence linking CASH to the hijacking. None of the known members have ever confessed. And the group was not known for pranks. They were more focused on computer systems than on television broadcasting. Theory 3. It was a disgruntled employee. Another theory suggests that the hijacker was angry about something. Perhaps they had been fired from a television station. Perhaps they wanted revenge. Perhaps they had a personal grievance against WGN or WTTW. The strange complaints about sportscasters could be inside jokes or references to real people. The reference to freak and liberal might have been aimed at a specific news anchor. The reference to the greatest American hero might have been a clue to the hijacker's identity. Perhaps he was a fan of the show, or perhaps he identified with the show's awkward, reluctant hero. But again, there is no evidence connecting anyone specific to the crime. No one has ever been publicly named as a suspect by the FBI or FCC. Theory 4. It was an art project. This theory suggests that the hijacking was a form of guerrilla art. The hijacker wanted to disrupt the mundane experience of watching television. They wanted to shock people. They wanted to make a statement about media and technology. They wanted to break the fourth wall between the viewer and the screen. In the 1980s, there was a movement called culture jamming that involved subverting advertisements and media. The most famous culture jammer was a man named Joey Skaggs, who staged elaborate hoaxes to critique the media. The Max Headroom intrusion fits that description perfectly. It was weird, funny, and impossible to ignore. It made people question what they were watching. But if it was art, why has no one claimed credit? Most artists want recognition for their work. They want to be known. They want to inspire conversation. Whoever did this has remained silent for nearly 40 years. That suggests either fear or indifference. Over the years, many people have been suspected of being the Max Headroom hijacker. Let me tell you about the most famous suspects. One early suspect was a man named Kevin D. He had a history of broadcast signal piracy. He had been arrested for pirating cable signals in the Chicago area. He allegedly told friends that he was involved in the Max Headroom hijacking. But when the FBI questioned him, he denied everything. Nothing was ever proven. He died in the 1990s without confessing. Another suspect was a group of engineering students from Northwestern University, or the University of Illinois. They had the technical skills. They had access to equipment. They might have seen the hijacking as a challenge, a way to prove that they could outsmart the system. But again, no evidence. In 2005, a Reddit user named Cranky Hippo posted a tip about the hijacker's identity. They claimed that the hijacker was a man named Michael, and that his father had been an engineer at WTTW. The post was deleted within hours. No one knows if it was true or just an internet hoax. In 2018, a VHS collector named JJ found a higher quality recording of the WTTW intrusion. He digitized it and uploaded it to YouTube. The improved footage revealed a small detail that had been overlooked for 30 years. On the flyswatter used to spank the hijacker, someone had scratched the words, "Test system." This small detail suggested that the hijacker might have had access to station equipment that had "test system" labels on it. That points back to an inside job theory. In 2019, a public access television show host named John R. claimed that he knew who the hijacker was. He said it was a man named Bob, who had since passed away. But he refused to reveal the full name out of respect for the family. John R. later died without providing any further evidence. None of these claims have been verified. None of them have led to a definitive identification. So what do we actually know about the Max Headroom hijacker? Let me summarize the confirmed facts. We know they were technically skilled. They built or acquired a small microwave television transmitter. They figured out how to override legitimate broadcast signals. They possibly had access to a microwave relay tower or a building with line of sight to the station's antennas. We know they had at least one accomplice. Someone operated the camera. Someone recorded the audio. Someone spanked the hijacker with a flyswatter. The hijacking required at least 2 people, probably more. We know they had a sense of humor. The hijacking was weird, but it was not malicious. No one was hurt. No threats were made. No property was damaged. It was a prank, an incredibly sophisticated prank, but still a prank. The hijacker did not try to incite panic. He did not try to promote a political message. He just wanted to be weird. We know they were familiar with pop culture. They referenced the greatest American hero. They referenced the NAACP. They referenced Canada. They used the Max Headroom mask. They quoted what sounded like song lyrics. "Your love is fading. I still see your face." And we know that whoever they were, they got away with it. The statute of limitations expired in 1992. Even if the hijacker confessed tomorrow, they could not be prosecuted. The crime is too old. The case is closed. The FBI has moved on. But they have not confessed. They have not come forward. They have not written a book or sold their story to a newspaper. They have taken their secret to the grave, or they are still alive, still silent, still waiting. Why would someone stay silent for nearly 40 years? Maybe they are embarrassed. Maybe they realized how dangerous the hijacking could have been. What if their transmitter had interfered with emergency broadcasts? What if someone had had a heart attack from the shock? What if the FCC had thrown them in prison? Looking back, they might regret the risk. Maybe they are afraid of legal consequences, even though the statute has expired. The FCC could still impose fines. The stations could still sue for damages. Coming forward would open them up to civil liability. Maybe they are protecting someone else. An accomplice who has since died, or who would be embarrassed by the revelation. A family member who does not want the notoriety. Or maybe, just maybe, they enjoy the mystery. They enjoy watching internet detectives chase their tails. They enjoy knowing that they pulled off something impossible and got away clean. They enjoy being the subject of Reddit threads and YouTube videos like this one. Some mysteries are like that. They are not meant to be solved. They are meant to be wondered about. Before I end, let me ask you something. Who do you think was behind the Max Headroom hijacking? Was it a disgruntled employee? A hacker? An artist? Or just someone who wanted to make a weird joke and vanish forever? And why Max Headroom? Was there a deeper meaning? Was it a reference to something specific? Or was it just because rubber masks were easy to find in 1987? Let me know your theories in the comments. I read every single one. Before you go, remember this: for 90 seconds on a Sunday night in Chicago, someone hijacked reality. They broke into people's living rooms. They made them laugh. They confused them. They annoyed them. Then they disappeared. Nearly 40 years later, we still do not know who they were. That is the power of a good mystery. It stays with you. It haunts you. It makes you wonder. If you want more deep dives into the weirdest unsolved mysteries of the 20th century, hit subscribe and turn on the bell. Share this video with someone who loves strange stories. That is how small channels grow. One share at a time. Thank you for watching Reddit T. Same channel. Same tea. New mystery. I will see you in the next video.